Hey guys, this is Austin. The iPhone XS is expensive, starting at $1,000 and reaching $1,450 for the maxed out Max. If you see what I did there, it's easy to say that this is the most expensive flagship ever. On the other hand, I recently took a look at the cheapest flagship you can buy, the $300 Pocophone F1. Even in its $400 armored configuration, which is what I have here, it is an incredible bargain. To be clear, I don't think anyone is cross-shopping these two phones, but I also don't think it's a crazy idea. Now sure, if you've got the kind of budget for a high-end flagship like the iPhone, by all means go pick one up. But I think for a lot of people, if you can get a very similar experience for a whole lot less, why wouldn't you? Which brings us to the real question of this video. Can a $400 Pocophone match up to a $1,000 plus iPhone? This is probably the strongest case for the iPhone XS. It has incredibly nice hardware. Not only is it rocking glass on front and back, but unlike most phones which are made out of aluminum, this has a stainless steel chassis. Now, of course, that's something that's up to personal preference. Some people won't like the idea that it is going to scuff a little bit easier, specifically with the silver edition. But as far as I'm concerned, it looks nice and it gives you a nice sense of heft, which feels very premium. On the other hand, the Pocophone is primarily made out of plastic. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. If you take a look at the Jerry Rig Everything video, he did a really solid test of seeing how durable it is, and it did hold up pretty well. Unfortunately though, plastic is never going to feel quite as premium as stuff like stainless steel and glass. To be fair, the armored edition I have here is a slight upgrade over the standard version, as the back is made out of aramid fiber as opposed to plastic. It feels nice and it does give you a little bit of grippiness that the iPhone lacks, but there's a clear winner here in build quality. It's the phone that costs 3 times more. There are some advantages to the Pocophone's hardware, however. USB-C versus Lightning is kind of a wash as far as I'm concerned, but what the Pocophone has that the iPhone lacks is a headphone jack. Unless you're tech racks and you drill one in, the iPhone XS is going to be using a whole lot of dongles and adapters to listen to music. The downside is that you're losing basically any kind of water resistance with the Pocophone F1, something that the iPhone has no problems with a full IP68 water resistance. Hey look, I didn't even press the screen. It still works though. You won't find wireless charging on the Pocophone, something that is standard on the iPhone. However, the Pocophone does have a fingerprint sensor, and to be fair, both phones have a pretty solid implementation of face unlock. The added advantage here is if you don't want to, stare at your phone and unlock it, just easily drop a finger on the button and unlock it like that. Let's be real though, the vast majority of people are going to put these phones in a case regardless, and the build quality is good enough that neither of them really worry me all that much. Now yeah, the Pocophone can't quite keep up with the iPhone, but considering how much more expensive this is, yeah, I would hope so. Usually when it comes to a budget phone, one of the biggest things you have to sacrifice is performance, but that's actually the strong suit of the Pocophone. Inside, you'll find a Snapdragon 845 paired with 6 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of storage. Now, that's not a perfect comparison, but in context, the iPhone only has 4 gigs of RAM and 64 gigs of storage on the base model. And again, it's $1,100. That is really impressive for a phone that's this much cheaper. However, as soon as you start trying to do any kind of benchmarks, you're going to find that the Pocophone just can't hang with the iPhone. It shouldn't be a huge surprise, but not only is the Pocophone going to be significantly slower than the XS, but even the OnePlus 6 is going to be quicker, even though it has basically the same spec. It's much the same story on the graphics side. The iPhone is a huge leap over what's available on the Android side, full stop, and the Pocophone is no exception. Surprise, surprise, this does apply to real-world use. So I don't think anyone would call the Pocophone slow, but put it side by side with the iPhone, and you will notice that there is a responsive difference. Responsive difference? A responsiveness difference? A difference in responsiveness, perhaps? Or a responsive difference. One thing I think is important to mention is that while the Pocophone is a global phone, it's not necessarily meant for the US market. Don't get me wrong, it is available to be purchased here in the US, but it doesn't have full LTE support for all the carriers. It's pretty good on AT&T and T-Mobile, but Sprint and Verizon are a bit hit or miss. This is all a lot more straightforward than you might think. Yes, the iPhone is faster, and that really shouldn't be a surprise, but when you consider the enormous price difference and the fact that the Pocophone can totally hang with the iPhone in some ways and slightly surpasses it in others is incredibly impressive. Take a look at the screens and you're going to find that they look very similar. The Pocophone has a slightly smaller 6.2-inch display, whereas the iPhone is rocking a 6.5-inch panel, but they're actually really close. There's no doubting that both these phones have quite the notch. I can't complain too much, so both the Poco and the iPhone do have not only their selfie cameras here, but they also do have some Face ID tech to be able to unlock. The issue here is that while the iPhone looks pretty much uniform on the rest of it, the Poco does have a pretty large chin. Considering that it's a third the price though, I really can't complain too much. Run the phones through our display tests, and what you'll find is something kind of surprising. Yes, the iPhone has a terrific display, and some of the things that our test doesn't really show is the excellent viewing angles as well as the contrast, but that being said, color accuracy and brightness on the Pocophone is right up there. In addition to having a slightly higher screen resolution, the real advantage for the iPhone is that it's using an OLED panel versus LCD. There's nothing wrong with a solid LCD like on the Poco, but you're not going to get quite as vibrant of a picture as on the iPhone. Still though, I'm incredibly impressed with just how close this gets. Surprisingly, both the iPhone and Pocophone share the exact same size 12 megapixel sensor. Now mind you, there are some other advantages with the iPhone, including having optical image stabilization as well as an actual telephoto lens, but on paper they look pretty close. It might not look particularly exciting, but this actually should be a reasonable test of the camera. Not only is there a lot of detail on the tree, but we've got a lot of vibrant colors as well as some serious dynamic range. It does seem like the iPhone got the white balance just a little bit more accurate. Detail-wise, they're fairly close. I will say that there's a little bit more dynamic range on the iPhone here, and it did do a good job of sort of warming up the image, but it's not a huge difference. Oh, that's a much bigger difference. The iPhone really was able to pull in a lot of that sky, whereas the Pocophone totally blew it out. Yeah, the Pocophone just does not hold the shadows as well as the iPhone. It also seems like it's a little bit over sharp in this photo. The iPhone does look a little bit more natural. It shouldn't be a huge surprise that the iPhone has a better camera. What I'm also curious about is the video capability. This is what 4K video looks like straight off of the Pocophone F1. So of course you guys can be the judge for yourself. I will say that there's not quite the same level of stabilization, so if we kind of move a little bit left and right, you'll be able to tell. But based on that and the audio, not bad. On the other hand, this is what you're going to be getting on the iPhone XS Max. Here we're recording at 4K 24 frames, although it is important to note that the iPhone will go all the way up to 60. But first of all, you're going to be getting stereo audio, something new for the iPhone. On top of that, to my eye, this is going to be a little bit more of a natural image with a little bit less sort of crunchiness and a little bit less compression. Next up, we have the front-facing cameras. Whereas the iPhone has 7 megapixels to work with, the Pocophone has 20. But is it actually any good? I will say I like the iPhone colors a bit more and there is more dynamic range, but I've got to give this one to the Pocophone. It's wider, which means of course you're going to be able to get more people in your selfies if you're super popular like Ken. But almost more importantly than that, it's a nice sharp image. Those extra megapixels are definitely doing something. So does the $400 Pocophone F1 match up to the $1,100 iPhone XS Max? Well, subjectively, the iPhone is a better phone, there is no doubt. And in a lot of ways, it's actually a pretty significant difference. But in most ways that people care about, I think the Pocophone is right there. And it is incredibly impressive that I'm even having this comparison, right? You might think that, of course, an iPhone is going to be way, way better. But considering that it's nearly 3 times the price, it is nowhere near 3 times the phone.